Quarterback injuries are shaking up the Thanksgiving games. We'll tell you who to get into your captain and MVP slots on those single game slates on a special bonus episode of the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid. I'm Austin Lee. I'm joined by John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts. And during the next half hour, we're going to get you ready for the 3 Thanksgiving Day games on DraftKings and FanDuel. And instead of our usual format, we're going to go game by game, reserving the most time for that high-scoring Falcons-Saints night game. But first, let's look at the morning game. That's the Bears at Detroit. Devin, I'll pitch it to you to talk a little bit about this, maybe give us a little idea what your strategy is for this day. But the injuries we're looking at here are Mitchell Trubisky looks like he may not go in this game with a shoulder injury. Kerryon Johnson does not look like he is going to go in this game for Detroit. And then I don't think we're going to see Marvin Jones in this game either. So there's some pretty important injuries for both teams. Devin, tell us what you think.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the later games in a little bit, which I do like that night game. And in order to get some of those players, I think we're going to want to save some money. So to me, the guy, there's been a ton of talk here in Chicago today about Mitchell Trubisky not playing. So Matt Nagy didn't come out and say it, but he basically said that he inferred that Chase Daniel is likely going to start. And I got to tell you, I think that he's the guy I'm going with at quarterback in both cash and GPPs this week because, I mean, look, Trubisky is one of, if not the worst deep ball passer in the NFL this year. He was 1 for 6 with 2 picks deeper than 15 yards. Chase Daniel's specialty is a lot like Trubisky in the sense that he's an underneath thrower, not as mobile as Trubisky, but he's familiar with the Nagy systems. And Nagy was his quarterback coach from 2013 to 2015. Detroit's secondary is basically falling apart. So they've allowed 355 yards and 357 yards back-to-back weeks. I think that unless you guys disagree with me, I'm going Chase Daniel pretty much everywhere to save the salary to get some of the guys in the later slates. Are we going – should I just keep going or do we want to toss around, does anyone have any interest in Stafford? How do you want to do this?
Let's see what the other guys think. Ryan, what do you think of the Chase Daniel pick, and who else do you like in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I like that Chase Daniel call. If you're going to kind of jam in a lot of those other high-priced guys, I think the other common construction you'll see is a high-priced quarterback like a Ryan or Brees, and we'll get to which one all of us like better later. And then you're going to need to find some values at the other positions. It usually is easier to do values at quarterback. I mean, these are the guys that touch the ball every play. They get more opportunities to score points. But there are some other values in this game that I like. Well, maybe not even that I like, but they exist and they could work out.
There you go.
So let me hedge that a little bit before I talk about LeGarrette Blount at 3,400. As we know, Kerryon Johnson is not going to play in this game. How Detroit handles their backfield, I don't know, but it would seem that there could be double-digit carries there. You're not going to rely on catches with LeGarrette Blount. Maybe he falls into the end zone a time, maybe 2, depending on how the game goes. I mean, I don't know, but on a slate like this with 3 games, it's hard to play strictly cash and play the probability game just because there's so much overlap in ownership. There's so much randomness that can happen, and it happens only in 3 games as opposed to all over the place on a 10 or 11 game slate. So embrace the randomness. If you really need a guy at 3,400 that you want to play Alvin Kamara, Julio Jones, etc. in your lineup, then I like Blount for that purpose. Again, I don't quite love it. But the other guy I like here that is cheap is Bruce Ellington for the Lions. He's 3,200. He's a guy who's going to be playing in the slot for them. I think Marvin Jones is likely to miss the game again. The target concentration there is getting heavily onto Kenny Golladay, which it should be. But there still should be some scraps left over for Ellington on those short A-dot throws that Matthew Stafford really likes. So he's another guy I like in this game if you're looking to plug a value. But I honestly, I do prefer Devin's course of taking the high projected touch volume guys and going low at quarterback.
Yeah, and we're recording this late on a Tuesday night, so keep an eye on these injury situations in case something dramatically changes on Wednesday or on Thursday before the games happen. John, I like how Ryan just sort of sneakily slipped in Julio Jones there just really briefly so that he wouldn't completely put Devin on tilt, but we'll get to that game later. John, what do you think of some of the guys that have been mentioned, and who else do you have on your list?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to the Chase Daniel thing. I get where Devin's coming from. I don't know I can get behind it, though. The guy's been in the league for, I think this is his 9th year in the league, and he's thrown 78 passes in the NFL. To lean on him for DFS purposes, whether it be in tournaments or not, I don't know that I can do it. I mean, you can have Dak Prescott for an extra $700 if you like him later in the afternoon. So I don't know whether I can get behind Chase Daniel. I get where you're coming from there, but he's not going to be the guy. I think I'm going to save some salary with some of the other players that were mentioned, guys like Bruce Ellington at 3,200. I think Theo Riddick should see more action this week. He was uber popular last week because of some of the injuries that occurred, and then Marvin Jones went down. And it's looking like he's trending towards not playing. So you've got Bruce Ellington on the outside. You've got Theo Riddick on the inside. LeGarrette Blount. I think there's plenty of opportunity to save money on this Lions team. But let's take it a step further. How many of these Lions do you trust? They are at home, but they're playing against one of the better defenses in the NFL. So there's that too. I don't know. I mean, I think from my perspective, this team probably does fall behind even with Chase Daniel, but I think they fall behind because, and dare I say it, Jordan Howard at 4,100. I don't know that he's a very talented running back at this point.
That's saying it lightly.
I think, yeah, I mean, he's averaging I think he's averaging about 3 yards per carry, but they're on a 4-game winning streak right now, and he has 22, 14, 11 and 19 carries or touches respectively in those games. I mean, quick math in my head says that's 16 touches a game at $4,000 on a team that's slated to win by 4 points. And they have a quarterback that they probably don't want to drop back a lot. So from my perspective, I think that that's the guy I want to have in this game that maybe won't be so popular in his GPPs because of what Devin said. And, I kind of agree with him. He's not a great running back, but they're going to give him the ball quite a bit in this game and try to let him win it for them.
Do you have any concerns that they're a road favorite playing in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day with their backup quarterback?
On the shortest break or shortest time between games in the history of the NFL.
This feels like a trap game to me somehow. But
it's not only 3. Like it should realistically be 6 or 7. Like if you want to be completely contrarian, just load up Stafford and Golladay and Riddick and just hope that Stafford has one of these performances like he did against the Eagles. What was it, last year or 2 years ago, where he threw for who knows how many, 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like he shows up on Thanksgiving. So I think Stafford, if you want, nobody's going to have him. I mean, not a single person. He'll be under 10% owned.
Yeah, with only 6 viable quarterbacks, he's probably still under 10% owned. Yeah.
I mean, there's a scenario, a realistic scenario where the Bears just don't show up.
Yeah.
2015, 337 yards and 5 touchdowns against the Eagles. That's a good day.
That was a good day. Says the Cowboys fan.
Taylor Gabriel, one more name to throw out there. I talked about Chase Daniel's flaw, which is his arm strength. Most of Gabriel's routes are underneath, and he'll spend about 20 to 25 snaps out of the slot. And Tease Tabor has been one of the worst corners in football, if not the worst slot corner in football. So it'll be Gabriel and Anthony Miller splitting time out of the slot. So I think both of them are – I like this game. I think this game could shoot out. I really do. I think I can't get behind Blount. I can kind of see Howard. But I like Riddick and I like Tariq Cohen as I see a lot of passing in this game, which probably means it'll be about 6-3. But if there's a game that exceeds our expectation, I don't see it in the next game that we're going to talk about, but this would be the game that I see these Thursday morning games have seemingly been a little bit strange.
They're a little bit wacky sometimes. For those guys playing the one-game slates, is there does anyone have a strong take on who to put into that captain or MVP spot here? Is this a Chase Daniel captain situation?
I'll say that I've been doing some reading and a little bit of my own internal research on these showdown slates, trying to learn what has the highest upside, and it has not been the quarterback position. Surprisingly, it's been running back and wide receiver. You need those guys typically in your captain or MVP spot. In fact, just last night, we're recording on Tuesday. We had a pretty exciting game with the Rams and the Chiefs, and Pat Mahomes went for a ridiculous number of fantasy points. But the winning lineup didn't have him in that slot. It actually was Tyreek Hill who won it.
Is that just the price difference? Is that why?
I think it is, yeah, because you're paying a premium for, quote, guaranteed points from the quarterback position because they know those guys are gonna touch the ball 30 times throughout the game, whereas wide receiver, running back on the top end, you're going to get 20 to 25 in many cases. So that's kind of where you want to be. That's not to say that on Thanksgiving that a quarterback won't win the game for you. But from my perspective, you want a guy who has high upside at wide receiver, running back position. And, guys like Kenny Golladay are going to be very popular. But this game is really interesting. Of the three, this is the most unpredictable that we're going to talk about today, in my opinion. One guy we haven't mentioned is Trey Burton. I wonder from that perspective how he's going to be playing into this Chase Daniel situation. You got to think that he runs the type of routes that Devin's advocating here, these underneath routes. And are you really going to rely on Chase Daniel to be finding Allen Robinson 15 and 20 yards down the field? I'm not so sure. So
I don't like Allen Robinson at all in this game.
Agreed.
I'm kind of with you on that. I
think he draws Darius Slay, and it's the one matchup I'm afraid of. Can I interject on the showdown thing real quick?
Sure.
Is this an exception with Daniel being 9,300 and he's 300 cheaper than Jordan Howard and 600 more expensive than Taylor Gabriel? Like I think the stats have shown that quarterbacks are typically the highest price.
Yeah.
So it may be a situation where I get why the rest of your lineup won't be as good, but to get a quarterback at 9,300 in that captain spot, I think he's going to be 70+% owned at that spot.
Well, if he's that high owned, then maybe he's not the right pick.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a lot of value to be had in this game, right? I mean, if you make me decide today between Bruce Ellington, and I think he's going to be cheaper. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. But if you make me decide between Bruce Ellington, who I suspect is cheaper than that, and Chase Daniel, I'll take Ellington. I think that he's probably the higher upside play there. But especially because I think he'll be lower owned.
Right. I would agree with that. Hey, let's move on. We've got two other games here. We talked about the quarterback injury in this first game. We've got a serious quarterback injury in this Washington at Dallas game. We're going to be seeing Colt McCoy starting in place of Alex Smith, who's out of this game. We're also keeping an eye on a couple of Redskins players who have been out for a while who may come back, although I'm not so sure. Chris Thompson and Jamison Crowder have been out. And then if you're trying to get cute with a lower owned play, don't play Jeff Swaim. He's out with a broken wrist for the Cowboys there. John, let's go to you first on this one, the resident Cowboys fan. What do you like about this game?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to plug my article here. I'll publish that on the site tomorrow afternoon. So certainly check that out. Tomorrow afternoon is Wednesday for those of you who are listening. And my final thoughts will be there. And one of the things I'm going to point out in the article is that, as we're putting together lineups for this slate, there are times when you really want to go with the chalk, and there are times you want to get away from it. And I think one of the times you want to go with the chalk on this 3-game slate is to just jam Ezekiel Elliott into your lineup against the Redskins. Of the running backs on the slate, he's a guy that I think that their team is committed to getting them the ball. He's from Ohio State, so Devin can't disagree with me, even though
I'm tempted. I have it in my hand. Really?
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, I'll hand it off to you in a second. But no, I truly believe that the Cowboys are committed to getting the ball into Ezekiel Elliott's hands and building a lead early, and not really forcing it. They're in a situation now. I think I read yesterday they have a 51% chance of making the playoffs, despite completely messing up their season early on. And why would you try to blow it against a Washington team as a home 7.5-point favorite? This is a situation where they should be leaning very, very heavily on Zeke Elliott. They lost their tight end, as Austin's already pointed out. Amari Cooper's coming off maybe a bit of a, quote, bad game, maybe a disappointing game.
Shocker.
Say again?
Shocker.
All the pieces.
It's a roller coaster.
To really say that, give it to Zeke, see if he can beat the Redskins on his own. And I think that there's evidence that suggests that's the case. And so if he's 70 or 80% owned, it's one of the few times on the slate that I'm going to say I'm going to be with the field on that front.
Devin, you were teetering on disagreeing there. Who do you like in this game?
My Thanksgiving turkey and stuffing. I mean, there's not a lot I like. The one thing I'll say about Elliott, he struggled mightily against this Washington defensive line the first time they played. He had 15 carries.
When he was the chalk of that slate.
15 carries for 33 yards. I like this front seven of Washington. I like them quite a bit. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Matt Ioannidis. And then at linebacker, Zach Brown's playing pretty well too. So that's the concern. But if playing cash, fine. Like I have no qualms about it. But if he's going to be as highly owned as what you say he is, there's no chance I'm taking him.
What happened? And let's talk about that. I mean, I know you're the big matchup guy for the site, but if you look at the first, let's call it 8 weeks of the season, the Redskins, you could not run against them.
Right.
I just pulled up their game logs. Not a single running back through 8 weeks of the season got above 61 yards, and that was Jordan Wilkins in week 2. That included Zeke Elliott, as you just pointed out, 33 yards in week 7. And since then, they've given up 148 yards to Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith. The Tampa Bay Bucks was that outlier game. Remember that game where they got 499 yards of offense and scored 3 points. And then last week, Lamar Miller and Alfred Blue combined for 130 yards. So are these outlier performances? What are we looking at here? I pull up the looking for it on the fly, Washington's rush defense, DVOA metric. I know you love this. They're 28th DVOA rush. What's the truth here? How good is this Washington rush defense?
I mean, as always, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think that they're as good as what they were at the beginning of the season, but they were 32nd. They were 30th or 31st in DVOA like 4 weeks ago. So you know what I feel about DVOA. I'm not going to go into that. They've been playing more and more nickel because their secondary has been banged up. Which you take a linebacker off the field, you're not going to perform as well. But I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's cause for concern based on that ownership. The recent trend isn't great. I'll give you that. But I believe I still like the players on that team.
Ryan, we haven't heard from you yet on this game. Do you have a strong take on maybe a captain or an MVP from this game if you're in a single game slate, or is this kind of like the meh game of the day?
Yeah, it's definitely the game I'm glad I'm going to be eating during. But it is. I guess it's more. It's just as much a season-long question, fantasy football question, as it is for DFS. But do we really think Colt McCoy hurts this offense and its players in losing Alex Smith? Because I don't. I think it's the same. I think you could argue there are some wide receivers that it might be better for. That Colt McCoy might make some bold throws to a tall guy like Josh Doxson. Alex Smith didn't like to do that. We already saw what Colt McCoy did.
Colt McCoy can't throw more than 15 yards downfield, so I wouldn't plan on Josh Doxson.
But he might make a tight window red zone throw that Alex Smith wouldn't. I mean, we already saw it. Granted, super small sample, but he made Jordan Reed better already.
I like Jordan Reed a lot this week.
And speaking of which, Jordan Reed might be the only, and it's going to be super chalky because if you look at tight end for this slate, there's really 3 viable options. So everybody's going to want to start with Jordan Reed. People will go down to, Bruce Ellington or LeGarrette Blount, like we talked about earlier, just to have Jordan Reed, I think. So that's a decision you got to make, whether you want to play or avoid Jordan Reed, I think. But probably too chalky to be a captain's slot, and maybe even too chalky to win a GPP unless he just goes crazy.
Let's talk about Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. What do you think?
He's out.
Completely game flow independent. In losses, I think he averages under 40 rushing yards. In wins, he averages over 100.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but he's coming back. The game's in Dallas, right? So, I mean, I don't love it, but he ran for 99 yards earlier against his defense on 24 carries. So the theory is if they just slow this game down, he could get 20-plus carries, and at his price, people are going to be afraid of him because Dallas's defense has been good. But I don't know. If he falls in the end zone and gets 70 yards, he's going to be one of the better running back values this week.
I think you're going to see lower ownership in this game, with the exception of Zeke Elliott, just because it is kind of the meh game of the slate. But I think there might be an opportunity here for, say, Doxson or Jordan Reed. Although tight end, like you said, it's tough. I think Josh Doxson might be an interesting play at lower ownership. All right,
are you guys going back to Amari Cooper?
No, I don't really like anybody a lot in the game because you mentioned Adrian Peterson getting 20 carries in a slow-paced offense. We know Dallas is a slow-paced offense. I just don't know how many possessions there are going to be in the game.
Yeah.
But who's the cheap guy in this game if you're playing this showdown?
I think there's other ones. Oh, well, if you're doing showdown, sorry.
Is it Cole Beasley? He's intriguing.
I'd rather have Doxson at 41. Well, that's a different pricing. Sorry, I'm looking at the 3-game pricing, but they have to be similarly priced, right?
Don?
If I was doing, I mean, I think Gallup is probably the guy that I gravitate towards most, coming off of some quiet games where everybody's going to be on Zeke, and that doesn't mean you can't have Zeke in the same lineup with a showdown. Gallup is a guy that I like, and I also think you could, again, in these showdowns, you need the one guy who's going to be less than 20% owned, who gets 5 or 6x on a salary. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but the who's going to be the tight end option in Dallas? If Swaim is out, is it going to be Schultz or Jarwin? Who is it? Whoever we think at the end of the day that person's going to be. I don't hate that idea because Prescott will throw to his tight ends. And of course, I'm trying to pull it up here on the fly.
I think it's Jarwin.
You think it's Blake Jarwin?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really difficult to say. I think the last time Swaim was out, it looked like it was Jarwin and Schultz almost split snaps at 45% each, and in that game, Jarwin had 2 targets and Schultz had nothing. But that's the type of risk that you have to take. It's $10 and the upside is tremendous. But you're going to need that one guy who nobody expects to score in order to pull down the top prize.
Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz sound like they belong in a country rock group more than on a football field. I'd rather have one of the Detroit tight ends again, we're
talking showdown.
We're showdown.
My bad.
If you need a belt buckle, I've got one for you.
Nice.
Throwback to last year's RG show. Nice. All right, let's talk about the game where, on the 3-game slate, this is going to be the very popular, where all the popular players are coming from. This is Atlanta at New Orleans. It's Vegas has it at 60 points. New Orleans is a 13-point favorite. The notable injury I have here is Tre'Quan Smith did not practice on Tuesday with a foot injury for the New Orleans receiving core there. Ryan, I'm going to come to you first to talk about the hot game. Who do you got here?
Yeah, I like Alvin Kamara even better than what John said with Ezekiel Elliott earlier. Right on cue, the Atlanta against receiving running backs just has to come up. It's 20.5 DraftKings points per game. The second most allowed is Kansas City at 17.4. So that is 3 full points per game more to running backs in receiving only. They've also been getting crushed by in the rushing game lately too. So I really like Kamara there. If Tre'Quan Smith is out, maybe it even opens up a red zone target or a few, other targets on other parts of the field as well for Kamara. So I think he's the guy more so than Zeke Elliott. Again, I just like the fireworks in this game, the possessions. I think he's going to get maybe not as many touches, but receiving touches and targets are much more valuable than carries, and he's going to get more of those, I think. I think, the big debate we talked earlier about, do you want to go cheap quarterback and then studs elsewhere, or do you want to go stud quarterback and cheap guys elsewhere? So I guess I'll just turn it over here so I don't monopolize the whole segment. But who do we like better between Matt Ryan and Drew Brees?
What do you think, Devin?
I mean, to me, it's Drew Brees. I think that the Saints defense, the Saints secondary is starting to turn around since the acquisition of Eli Apple. We saw it last week. We saw it the week before that against Cincinnati. I think that this is a defense that we had thought when they acquired, or I had thought when they acquired him, that they would improve. They've started to show signs. 13-point dogs. This could be a game where Matt Ryan struggles a little bit, or this game could be, I don't know, it could be 42-30, and both quarterbacks have tremendous games. So I'm assuming that there's going to be a blowout in this game, which ultimately means that I don't like either of them as much as I do the cheap quarterback route with spending up at the other positions. I don't think that there's enough upside, especially at the running back position, to go super cheap this week.
Because if you go cheap at quarterback, then you can get a guy like Michael Thomas in your lineup. You can get Kamara or Ingram.
You can get Elliott and Kamara if you want
Right.
Or Elliott and Ingram, and just hope that Kamara doesn't have a good game.
Right.
John, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, so number one, were you guys as surprised as me at this line? Is Atlanta that bad?
They are when they play in New Orleans, yes. And their defense is that bad.
They lost to the Browns.
Yeah, they lost to the Browns.
No, and they lost to my Cowboys at home, just a few days ago. So I get kind of the negative sentiment around them, but you think, well, these teams, they get together, they score 100 points, they do whatever. But Atlanta, they're only they're fourth in terms of implied team total on the slate. The Chicago Bears have a higher implied team total. The Cowboys have a higher implied team total. And a lot of people are going to gravitate towards Matt Ryan, and I think it's understandable because they think that, the game script sets up well for him to have to throw the ball 40 times. I don't think that that's a bad thought process. The question is Devin right? And I kind of agree with you, Devin. This New Orleans defense may have turned a corner when they traded for Eli Apple a few weeks ago. Last year, Eli Apple, he was kind of the whipping post there in New York. This year, he turned it around. He was a young guy. I think he had some attitude problems, some mental issues.
And he's on a team with seven Ohio State teammates, including the mentor of all of the corners in Kirk Coleman. So Kirk Coleman's not playing, but he's the mentor for all of these young Ohio State corners. So the attitude and the culture is much different.
Yeah, I'm kind of aligned with you on this front, and I'm starting to believe that this New Orleans defense is a bit better than maybe we're thinking. And so that's not to say that I won't have any exposure to the Falcons. I think there's a good reason to have them. And I'm kind of just talking loosely here about this game in general rather than naming out players, but I will name out a player now. Alvin Kamara, I get it, guys. I get it. But I'm looking at some early ownership projections, not from our Steve Buzzard, but from another source. And Alvin Kamara is projected at being owned at twice the rate as Mark Ingram. I think that's entirely too high if that's what ends up being. Of course, in Buzzard, I trust. So when Buzzard numbers come out, I reserve the right to change my mind. But if that's the case, there is no way that Ingram should be owned at half the rate as Kamara, because Kamara does not have twice the chances of getting GPP value as Ingram, especially when they're 13-point favorites. We tend to know that when they get ahead, they really feed Ingram a bit more than they do Kamara.
What do you got, Ryan?
No Traquan Smith, could you play both?
That was my point. What you said, Elliott might be 70 or 80%. What if Kamara is pretty similar or even lower than Elliott? Then you could just play Kamara and Ingram. Because I think your point on Elliott over Kamara is Dallas doesn't have an Ingram, maybe. But
yeah, I mean, I think the deal is with New Orleans, they've got a bunch of guys they can give the ball to. Dallas, they have shown and they demonstrated historically they're going to feed Zeke and they're going to make you beat them somewhere else. And, and I'm looking at the implied ownership. They're about the same, Zeke and Kamara. They got Zeke at 68 and Kamara at 65. It's pretty close.
I agree with the distribution of touches and everything, but New Orleans is projected to score 36.5 points. So
yeah,
I'll take fewer a smaller piece of a bigger pie.
And like 7 more possessions.
Exactly.
Any Atlanta receivers that you like? Do you guys like Julio? I kind of like Mohamed Sanu out of the slot against PJ Williams. Probably the best matchup of the 3. But you guys know how I feel on Julio, so I'll let someone else.
Well, if you're playing him, it needs to be on DraftKings because Julio and Michael Thomas are the same price on FanDuel, but Julio's $600 cheaper on DraftKings. So if you're looking for one of those guys and you want it to be Julio, or if you just want one of them, then it's Julio on DraftKings, maybe Thomas.
Or on a GPP, you theoretically could reverse.
That's a good point.
So in cash, you could definitely do that, but the ownership's going to also sway that way. So
agreed.
So I'm with you on Sanu for the reason you described. PJ Williams has been terrible. What about as a GPP flyer, Ito Smith in a losing game script? Lots of dump off passes. I think he's 3,400 if I'm not mistaken. Should be relatively low owned. We got 5% is what I'm seeing. What about him? You got to have somebody that's lower than 10% to win a GPP.
I kind of prefer Coleman.
Yeah, if you're talking dump-off passes, Ito Smith has exactly 2 targets in 4 out of the last 5 games, and the other one was 5 targets. But Coleman, his last 3 games, has 7, 5, and 3. So the 3 and the 2 were splitting hairs, but there's 5 target or more upside with Coleman probably more likely.
I look at which running back do I trust to potentially break a 50-yard screen to the house, and that to me is Tevin Coleman.
Hey, I might 4 times as highly owned, just for the record.
What about one of these New Orleans receivers, though? I mean, if Traquan Smith is out, would you rather throw a dart at like Keith Kirkwood or something? Playing for the team that's gonna score a ton of points.
I think on the showdown slate, it's interesting.
Right.
I'm not doing it on the. I mean, look, I'm going Chase Daniel in basically every lineup. And that allows me to avoid the what is his name, Kirkwood?
I'm sorry, Keith Kirkwood.
Kirkwood. So I'm avoiding those guys. If I'm taking a flyer on them, it's in the first game at Taylor Gabriel or Theo Riddick or those types of players. I think the target distribution, at least, is pretty clear in this game with Julio, Ridley, Sanu, Michael Thomas, Mark Ingram, Kamara, and maybe Austin Hooper or Tevin Coleman.
Yeah. I think the showdowns, you're definitely going to dig deeper, but I see what you're saying about the 3-game slate. All right, guys, parting thoughts. Any players or strategies you didn't get to mention? Also, what's that?
Anything. Defenses?
Sure. Name a defense, Devin.
New Orleans Saints. They're 2,300 on DraftKings, and I don't have FanDuel up, but they're simply too cheap. We talk about them playing well. When you're up by a lot, which they're projected to be, teams have to throw a lot against you, which creates turnover opportunities. So they're the team. If you want to spend up, go with the Bears just because they're the most dominant team this year. But the Saints, they're 3,200 on – the Saints are 3,200 on FanDuel. So 23 on DraftKings, 32 on FanDuel.
Yeah. Devin, did you have any other parting thoughts, any sort of features we've got going that are special this week?
Yeah, so we're starting a showdown slate. So slate write-ups for every showdown game for the rest of the year over at footballguys.com. I'm participating in some of those. So go over there, check them out, give us some feedback, whether it's email or Twitter or in the YouTube comments, whatever you want to do. I'll look at all of that. So should be fun. Should be a good time. First time we've ever done something like it. So,
Ryan, what are your parting thoughts?
I got them all out there. Just have fun with your family on Thanksgiving and enjoy the football, but not more than the important family stuff if you enjoy that. So have a good one, and I'm very thankful for all of our frequent listeners and viewers. I'm starting to see repeat weekly comments from certain folks in YouTube and Twitter, and it's just awesome to know that people actually listen to what we say.
Yep, we appreciate you guys out there.
Or don't, just be entertained by us. That's fine too.
That's true as well. John, bring this home. What are your parting thoughts?
Two things. These showdown slates, I told you I've been doing some reading and just a little bit of independent research. It seems, and imagine this. I mean, this is Thanksgiving. I'm going to talk about kickers for a moment.
What?
Yeah. Typically we think, well, the kickers are super cheap, and if they get a few field goals, they could achieve value. But a pretty good sample size at this point shows that rostering kickers does not let you get into the top 10% of these showdown slates. So you probably want to avoid that on Thursday. And that said, defenses will get you there. And so I think that, we've got a couple situations that are unique. Devin's already talked about New Orleans and their improving defense. And, of course, we have a couple defenses going up against quarterbacks who are relatively untested. In the case of Chase Daniel with the Detroit Lions. You've also got the Cowboys who I'm not I'm not one of these homers. Typically I'm a pretty bad Cowboys fan. But they are going up against Colt McCoy as lofty home favorites. And I do think the Cowboys actually have a pretty good defense this year, especially when Sean Lee's on the field, which is still debatable for this week. But nonetheless, don't be afraid to get those defenses into those showdown lineups. And I'll close by saying that in addition to the showdown write-ups that Devin mentioned, there will be a GPP-specific article for both FanDuel and for DraftKings. I'm writing the DraftKings one. It should be live on the site tomorrow afternoon. That's Wednesday, about 24 hours before the slates kick off. And Justin Bonema, who is a go-getter, he's already beat me to the punch. It's live on the site now. So if you're listening to this, head on over to the site at Justin Bonema on Twitter, has written up everything you need to know about that Thanksgiving slate for FanDuel, very specific to those of you who like to play on that site.
I like how John lured us in saying, I'm going to talk about kickers, and he really only brought them up to say, don't play kickers.
Play them.
Yeah, that's completely shocking, John. All right, but I appreciate that insight. Guys, if you have not had a chance to listen to our Week 12 main slate show, you get 2 episodes this week, so go listen to that or watch that. And if you've already listened to it, we appreciate you tuning in.
Listen to it again.
Listen to it again.
Click it from a different device.
And you can exit. It's fine.
Click it from a new device.
Nice. Excellent. So for our latest DFS content, go over to footballguys.com, and we will be back at our regular time next Friday morning with our Week 13 episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee saying Happy Thanksgiving and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.